Welcome.
Thank you.
So I want to ask you a lot of personal questions about how you got on this path, but I want to ground it in the income question first. Can you describe what your city is doing in partnership with the Economic Security Project around this idea of a guaranteed income?
Well, first of all, good evening and good to see you guys stay around all day. I know my brain hurts from all the interesting ideas and suggestions on how to do it, so I thank the Economic Security Project, not just for seeding the work in Stockton, but for the work you're doing to spark a conversation with many other advocates in the room nationwide. In terms of your question, basically, I'm so thankful we have a 6 to 9 month design process that starts in January. So a lot of the details are still to be worked out, but what we do know, it'll be $1 million. It'll be an unconditional cash transfer.
Everybody gets $1 million?
No.
Oh.
Unless you got friends. Wait. Unless you got friends, man, we could do it. I'm down to pilot that too.
All right.
So $1 million total, and hoping to raise more, to give individuals $500 a month, no strings attached.
Right.
So we're figuring out, is it going to be universal, so you can be the richest person in Stockton and the poorest person to qualify? Are we going to do it around median income, or maybe 25% higher than median area income? Those are things we're going to work on in the design phase.
Why are you doing this?
So it's funny. So when we came to the idea with my staff, I was like, I don't see the controversy. Like, how is this a bad thing? Because it's a pilot. Like, I still understand, like, the trolls on my Facebook. I still understand what they're mad about. It's not.
They're bots. So.
No, some of them are real. I see them at the store. And
Yeah.
anyway.
Well, you're the troll for my Facebook page, and you're also buying condensed milk. Interesting.
But what I would say is, I think growing up, well, a couple of things, right? Because I think the conversation is one about poverty.
Okay.
And I think poverty is very real and it's evil, and it's something we have to address as a country. But I was in an argument with a reporter on the phone earlier today. But universal means everybody. Yeah. That means you too, right? So I think the idea is that, number one, just as a mayor of a city that's still recovering from the recession, I have people who are working incredibly hard, who are still struggling to pay bills. In fact, I think the people who work the hardest in our society oftentimes make the least. Because I would say picking fruit or washing after people or dealing with people's attitudes is more difficult than sitting in meetings and writing on Post-its. Important work, but I think those folks work really hard. So number one, it's just a real concern that ordinary, regular people, Americans, hardworking folks, our cousins, ourselves, are getting left further and further behind in the economy. And then number two, I remember my sophomore year in college reading Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos Our Community by Dr. King. And there was a page devoted to this idea of a universal basic income. And that was interesting to me because I had thought I was like a Black History buff, not like Dorian, but close.
None of us is like Dorian.
I was close, though.
Got a
I'm
PhD.
joking. Yeah. And I had not heard any discussion that was one of the things he was advocating for before he was assassinated. So I've always kept that in the back of my mind as an interesting policy discussion that we would have at some point in my adulthood. And then over the last couple years, just looking at interventions for poverty specifically, and I remember telling my staff, find the craziest idea, and it was like, well, we could give everyone money. So we had been, but it was politically untenable. I was like, we don't have money. The city had just declared bankruptcy. We're like paying for cops and libraries and things like that. So luckily, at the same time we're having that internal conversation, I struck up a conversation with Natalie from the Economic Security Project, and they mentioned some of the work they were doing. I mentioned some of the work we were doing, and we just emails, Google Docs, Hangouts, travel, and now we're here.
What are you? I like the plug for Google Docs. That was nice. What do you worry about most? What are some bad outcomes or risks that you see associated with this test?
I'm the wrong person to ask. You have to ask my staff. I literally don't see how this is risky. If it fails, 100 families got $6,000 extra a year. Like, that's a great failure. Like, I'll take that every day. But the biggest thing I'm scared about is the framing. And that's why I've been very adamant to talk about how the issue with poverty or with being working class or being working poor, hence the term working poor, it's not an issue of character or personal misgivings. It's the issue of not having enough money. It's the issue of cash. I've been adamant saying that, because everyone's like, well, what if people buy liquor? What if people buy marijuana? And I'm like, well, I don't think folks making median income and below have a proclivity for moral misgivings more than anybody else. I think from billionaires in the White House on down, there's people with moral issues and personal misgivings. So that
Unproven billionaires in the White House, by the way.
he has cabinet members that are billionaires though, and they also may have some moral misgivings. I don't know them as well. So I'm just worried about the framing because I think part of the issue is that the conversation around who's deserving in this country, and I'm sure the race and gender panel talked about that, has racial and gender overtones and undertones. So I'm just worried that the great work, the great stories can be lost in this debate as to who is deserving, despite the fact that the word is universal, which means everyone. So I think I'm excited about the project, though, because it gives us an opportunity to have a real conversation in this country about what's our social contract, what's our social safety net, what do we owe each other as community members, and how do we want people to live with dignity. So I'm excited about that. So I guess the risk is that I just don't see the risk, man. So.
Tell me some unique things. Tell me what's special about Stockton for you?
Well,
the reason I ask is you are on a path that so many, I share some of your story. My father was murdered when I was a kid. I was raised by my mother, and I got scholarships, and I went to an Ivy League school. And a lot of us are celebrated for our escape from the places we came from. It's like, oh, you got out, congratulations. And it's like, no, that's a sadness, right? That is a mourning. It's like we shouldn't have had to leave in the first place. And you went back. So when I ask why is Stockton special to you, it's in the context of some of this painful history, some of your surface media celebratory story of like, oh, Google and the White House and Stanford, and now you're actually serving in this elected position there.
Yeah, well, actually, growing up, my motivation was getting out. That was my goal. Because like many communities like Stockton, success was defined as leaving, and if you stayed, that meant something was wrong with you. So if you went to community college or even went to UOP, it was like, maybe they couldn't go nowhere else, because why would you stay? So it wasn't until the murder of my cousin that brought me back. If that hadn't happened, I would not be in Stockton, not be on this stage. But I think Stockton is special because it's home. And I remember even being in college and having conversations about kind of the rest of America. There's just these misconceptions that everyone who has money, it comes from like our Protestant and Puritan and prosperity gospel roots, I think, that everyone who has money is inherently good. There's something good about them. And everyone who doesn't have money or may struggle is inherently bad. But that was the opposite of what I grew up. The people I grew up with, from my mother to my grandmother, my aunts, my basketball coaches, my teachers, they were all like good people, working incredibly hard and weren't expecting anybody to do anything for them, disdain handouts, and always were trying to figure out how to get a hand up. So I think Stockton is special because I tell people all the time, it's a microcosm of America. It's incredibly diverse. I went to a school that was 75% Latino, for example. The city is about 35% Latino, 20% Asian, 35% white, the rest African American. So it's incredibly diverse. It's a picture of America, and I don't see people there complaining or crying or blaming people or being victims. I see people struggling despite structural barriers that make their efforts sometimes not produce the gains you would expect for the amount of energy that's expended.
And paint a picture. You started to get into it with the high school demographics. What does Stockton look like? Who are the people of Stockton? What are some of the demographics? How do people work?
Yeah, Stockton is again, at one point we had the largest Filipino population outside the Philippines in the world in Stockton. The city is 10% Filipino by itself to this day. The oldest Sikh temple in North America is in Stockton. Huge Hmong population. Bunch of folks from the Khmer Rouge massacre settled in Stockton. Huge Cambodian presence. A lot of Chicano Latinos in Stockton. In the industry, a lot of it's in ag. A lot of it is service industry. Our biggest employers are like city government, school district, and county government. And it's interesting. I remember when I first read that when I was like in school, high school, I was like, man, we must have a lot of teachers. And then I realized I know those are the bus drivers, the maintenance workers, the cooks, the janitors. And there's also a lot of folks who commute 3 hours every day to work in the Bay Area to avail themselves of some of the opportunity here. Whether I'm working at some of the biggest companies or driving Ubers and Lyfts, or I just was at the Battery for a meeting and I was like, the host was from Stockton, and we had a good. I was like, you drive all the way? The Battery's nice, but you can drive that far. It's not that nice. But That's really the city, and it's a city you meet the nicest people. There was something that went viral on Twitter that had like a Punjabi family and a Latino family blocking off a street, which I'm not cool with. But in that context, it was cool.
Officially, he's not cool.
Yeah, I'm
with
not
it.
officially not cool with it. But they invited me next year, I might go. But they were like just dancing and showing each other dances and going back and forth, and pretty soon it's like a whole block party. And that's Stockton. It's a great city. It's a city of folks, just like most folks in this country, that really deserve a fair shot, a real opportunity, a real chance to kind of make the American dream a reality.
A lot of our discussion about cities, especially cities that have gone through bankruptcy and major challenges around the economy, when you're outside of an area like San Francisco, or in my case, I live in New York, there is this presumption that the people of San Francisco have a lot to teach the people of Stockton, that the industries of the Bay have a lot to teach the industries of Stockton. I'd like to flip that around. What do you think that the concentrated wealth and upward mobility of an area like this could learn from Stockton? What does Stockton have to teach the rest?
Well, not even Stockton, because I think there's pockets of poverty in San Francisco. Even with gentrification, there's still, you guys got, all the poor people aren't gone. So I think what there has to be taught is that, number one, talent and intellect are universal, but resources and opportunities aren't. That there's people who are just as smart, if not smarter than me and you, who may be an Uber driver or who may be a Lyft driver, who may have had choices, made some choices that precipitated that, but also were probably born in a context and environment where their opportunity structure wasn't equal or didn't have as much. So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing, and I know at least what they teach me, is just what hard work really looks like. Like getting yelled at meetings and talking, sometimes it's hard and meeting people, but I'm not out in the hot sun with no health benefits picking fruit. I'm not driving for 12 hours a day, dealing with everyone's attitudes, and on Fridays, crazy drunk people. I don't have to do that. I go to sleep. I don't have to work longer and longer and longer and get less and less and less. And to continue to have hope, to continue to believe that they have a part of this American experiment, this American dream, to continue to strive, I think that's something we can all learn from, because that's real tenacity, that's real grit, that's real resilience, that's like real iteration. Is figuring out how you're going to pay your light bill, your water bill, and buy your kids clothes with only $100. That's like innovation, and they do it and they might borrow here. So I would argue the traits that the Valley really values you find in places with less opportunity, because folks have to do it not just for a job or for some PQs or whatever those things, the little merit systems they have, but for like survival.
What's the most fun part of being a mayor? You get like a sash?
I think the most fun part of being mayor is that, like, being 27 and being a little irreverent, I could still be me because they got 4 years. So I'm here for 4 years, right? So that's the fun part.
Yeah.
Or like people say something, and I'm like, well, I'm the mayor. So that, you know, I'm gonna let you talk, but at the end of the day, I'm held accountable for the decisions I make because the people entrusted me. So that's a lot of fun because it trips some people out. They're just like, oh.
You ever get like cut off in traffic and like, excuse me, I'm the mayor.
No. I try to hide because I drive crazy sometimes.
What's the least fun part, or one of the pieces of the least fun parts?
I think it's probably two things. Number one, you have 4 to 8 years. Government in and of itself can't solve every issue. Most issues we're dealing with are older and have been more persistent than I've been alive. And people have a real expectation that something could be done and get better, but you also don't have it's not king. It's not, I can't rule unilaterally. I have to rule by consensus with my council and with other entities and bodies. So that's difficult because you see the need, you want to respond, but it takes a long time to kind of get to the progress. I think the second hardest thing is that nihilism is real. So trying to talk about kind of hope and change and doing things differently is difficult, especially for folks who've been talked to and excited and before and have been burned. So kind of rebuilding that trust, and then also just understanding that for all the ideas and energy, you're not going to solve everything in 4 to 8 years. So just really being content with setting up institutions and policies and programs that will last past your term.
right? Right? That's worth it. It's worth a wow. Why did you choose this electoral politics path? That you didn't start a business, you didn't start a nonprofit or join an existing one. You ran for office. Why did you choose that to try to have some impact?
I started a couple nonprofits in college, but
Humbly corrected. Yes, I did that too.
No, but I think for me, I came from like a community organizing and advocacy background. And then I realized, just by virtue how our facade of meritocracy works, because I went to Stanford, there's doors and tables and seats I can sit in by virtue of just of that experience and that privilege that a lot of my friends who are organizers and advocates can't, despite the fact they may be very versed on the policy, et cetera. And then I was thinking, I hate asking people to do stuff for me if I have the agency to do it myself. And in terms of like policy, the best way to do that is to be an elected official.
I write my own damn policy.
Or our policy collectively, but I get to be part of the team.
Yeah, I think like a king. I'm sorry. This is why he's in office and I tell jokes.
No. So that was why, and I'm obsessed with scale. And I think in the nonprofit space, in the social entrepreneurship space, and then even in the innovation, starting your own company space, you can touch most people, unless Google that touches everyone. But government law and policy affects everyone. That's like real scale. I've just always been obsessed with that. Like, how do you serve the most amount of people? And also because government is slow, and oftentimes the people who make policies, to your point earlier, even though I visited jail, I'm not planning to go to jail.
That's the best way to go to jail is to visit.
Yeah. I did a lot of empathy tours. But I would say that a lot of people who make policies oftentimes are impacted by the policies. So I felt almost a calling, if you will, just given personal experiences, given being able to be just as comfortable in the mid in San Francisco as I am in South Stockton, vice versa. Put me in a position to do something that a lot of people who have similar experiences and similar ideas probably wouldn't be taken as seriously, incredibly, especially as young. So I felt it wasn't like something like I'm excited to do this. It was like I have a responsibility to do it.
I felt like you kind of had to do it.
Yeah.
You touched on it, but I want to push in on this idea, talent recruitment. We mostly hear bad stories about government. It's ineffective. It's slow, to your point. And the people of your age and background and skills are very much allured to money-making ventures to put all those talents to use. So if you were in charge of a marketing campaign for government, what are some of the messages you might spread? How would you encourage more talent, more people, to your point about scale as well, to remind people that this is a path that not just you, but like other people should consider?
Well, it would be a targeted recruitment. Because I don't think everyone should run for office. That's crazy. You see what that got us. You know, that's just not where we need to go.
I don't know what you mean.
And I think, and this is going to sound cliche, but this is what I told my mom when I told her I was running for city council, and she was just so confused. She said, we spent all these years, we sacrificed, you went to Stanford, and you're going to come, what? And make how much? What? She was like, really, like, she was having a crisis. Like, what did I do wrong?
The same thing parents say to comedians.
Yeah. Oh. And then I said, well, Mom, at this point in life, I'm more interested in making change than dollars. That was good, right?
Was good. You're very quotable. You're very memeable. There's a lot of memes tonight.
No, so I think that would be kind of the marketing campaign. And also I think, especially for me, studying history, so much of what we enjoy is because someone sacrificed. So the fact that we're even on the stage, the fact that I'm even the mayor is because people literally died for the right to vote, for example.
Yeah.
So I think with that comes a responsibility, and I love Hamilton. And there's a couple songs, but the one on my mind now is "History Has Its Eyes on You," and it's this responsibility that the future's looking back and saying like, "Hey, where are you going to leave us?" So if I was recruiting people, I would say, if you're obsessed with kind of legacy and sort of what the world will look like after you're gone, you might, because things you have to do government for life. Yeah. Do a term, do 2 terms, do something else. You're not wedded to that, and people are trying to live forever anyway, so why not spend some time in local government?
History has its eyes on you. It's also known as the creepy stalker song from Hamilton. I was like, why are you looking at me, history? What's your hope for this program, the SEED program, and tell everybody SEED, what those letters stand for. What is your highest hope for the outcomes?
So SEED stands for Stockton Economic Empowerment Demonstration. And my best hope, it's a couple. So I think the first one is to really have especially looking towards 2020, having a very serious conversation about what is it we can do around the social safety net, and also to provide folks the opportunity to avail themselves to this American dream, and really have Stockton be ground zero for that discussion. What can we do for folks who have been left behind despite working? And I think that's the thing that kills me, because the folks I know who work the hardest don't have a lot of money, but they work incredibly hard, under the table, over the table, cleaning tables. They do it all. The second is to really just show the talent, the grit, the resiliency, and the drive of the folks who receive it. And to really put a new narrative around what does it mean not to have money in this country. And because even now in San Francisco, if you make $90,000, you're low income.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it is.
I would love to try that. That could be. Let me try to be low income at 90,000. But just to really show sort of how smart, resourceful people are when given the opportunity. Though, if we do those two things, I'll be through the moon and really excited.
There's different levels that this can be tested at. You're doing it at a city level. There's counties and states and nationally. What are some of the constraints as you start to design the city program that you have in mind that it would be a lot easier if we did this with the county's involvement or with the state's involvement or with the federal government's non-destruction?
Well, I think for especially, we're still figuring out the criterion, but I would imagine folks who are on some sort of assistance would still be eligible, so working with the county would be easy to make sure that doesn't change the eligibility for what they have. 'Cause I think
you definitely want to make
a lot of people are like terrified, like this is going to replace the safety. I'm like, no, it's an enhancement. I'm saying we could do this and like let's be iterative and make it better. So working with the county in that way. And then if we were to target it, working it with the county would be helpful, because they have oftentimes better data systems in the city as to if we went to do like a fourth families most in need, the county would have that data system. If they were formally part of the project, it'd be easier to kind of get that information from them.
Right. How did you find the economic security project? Or how did they find you?
It's a mixture of both.
Yeah.
No, so we were at I think it was Y Combinator or Tech for America convening around the gig economy. And I like read bios before I go places. So I wasn't familiar with the economic security project, but I just knew Natalie was a cool person. So I said, I'm gonna talk to Natalie. She might be doing something cool.
Yeah.
And then we talked before we left, and she mentioned what she was doing, and I was like, oh, well, we have a team of folks in Stockton researching it. Because like some interns had wrote a memo about it. And I was like, this is cool. We're gonna look into this in a second. But they have been thinking and figuring out, okay, what would it look like to make it a city policy? Where would possible revenue come from? And some of our policy team got involved. So it was just percolating. But it was I have a list in my office of like crazy ideas we may or may not get to. But
I want to see that list.
Yeah, but a lot of them are crossed off. It's amazing.
Because you already did them?
We're doing them. They're in motion.
Really?
Yeah.
What else is on the list?
Can't share. It's in the
Come
office.
on now.
It's in the office.
Do the Steve Bannon photo with the crazy stuff on the whiteboard. Come on.
No. One is this idea. Two ideas. Both deal with money. One is this program called Advanced Peace, which really targets supports and interventions on the less than 100 men who drive the city's violent crime rate. And one is, we haven't figured out a name for it, but kind of model after the Oakland Promise, and figuring out how do you build a cradle-to-career continuum supports for kids grow up in Stockton, and then when they graduate, guarantee that they'll be able to afford the university or trade school or whatever they do after to go to. So that's how we met, and then we have been talking and emailing and calling and just figuring out, okay, what would it look like? Then they came to Stockton and met with some of the amazing folks in my city and fell in love, and then we continue to say, well, hey, if we were to do it, this is how we would do it, community-driven, storytelling, really empowerment, not a handout, but a hand up, and then they called us one day and said, congratulations. And we're like, yes, cross it off the board.
Now to get alligators to every child. A crazy idea. It's my subtle nomination. I want to talk about, because narrative and perception keeps coming up, and you're in a position where you're going to face probably already a lot of heat. You talked about these trolls that you run into. But what are people's fears? Like you don't see risk, but you do feel heat. And I'm sure you get a lot of negative feedback. You talk about people yelling at you at meetings. What are they yelling about on this subject? What are they most concerned about with the launch of this test?
I have amazing staff, so they filter a lot of social media stuff. But what I can imagine is that people would be upset that they don't see themselves reflected as a possible recipient, despite the fact that it's, in theory, universal. So that's one big one. Number two, which I think is a corollary to number one, I think people could be fearful that, I think people are just upset they might not get the money, honestly.
Is there anyone mad in terms of feedback you've received about folks who don't deserve it getting money?
Yeah, but I think that goes back to I deserve it. Why don't I get any money? I really think, and that's why the term universal, maybe we should just define what universal means. Because
everybody gets money. You just call it everybody gets money.
In theory, but I also think there's arguments for targeted universalism. Like
that's not universal.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But in theory, it's universal. But I don't think we need to necessarily run with universal. I think it's possible to have a hard policy conversation about why some people may be more deserving for a wider community benefit than others. Like, it feels weird that a billionaire would get, I don't know, I'm still working through that.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with both as long as people get money, right? It's a good thing. So I think that's the big thing, just feeling like these folks don't deserve it. Or these folks, there's something wrong with them, or they're going to use it for drugs, or they're going to use it for bad things. Like, why? I think that's, and then also this perception of like widespread abuse of the social safety net without really thinking through maybe the social safety net is not sufficient.
We're running out of time. And I want to ask you to do this. Jay McGonigal gave us this exercise. Were you here for that? Earlier today? Were you here for that part? It's okay. It's okay. You're a mayor. You're busy.
No, I don't want James mad at me. I was here, but please re-explain it.
You won't be mad. No, now I'm getting tested. There's a first-person way to describe it. I want you to own it. You talked about Stockton, but describe yourself after this successful test. What do you see differently about your town? What do you see differently about the possibilities of this American dream you seem so excited to extend to folks? What have you learned after this is done, in the best version of this experiment? Use the first person.
Okay. I feel excited and happy that people see what my biases and assumptions are/were, and that if you give people the opportunity, they're rational actors. I am energized by the opportunity to have this conversation, not just in Stockton, but at other places, and to really talk about the American dream and kind of fulfilling the legacy of folks like Dr. King. I'm tired from the amount of questions I've received about basic income, universal basic income. Yeah. But I'm also having Prosecco with the Economic Security Project co-chairs as we toast to the crazy thing we did 3 years prior.
Give it up. Futurist, Mayor of Stockton, California, Michael Tubbs. Thank you, guys. A pleasure. And just, can I get one more moment from me to all of y'all, and especially to the co-chairs who will be drinking Prosecco in exactly 3 years. One, you've done an incredible job with this program. And I just want to acknowledge how well this has been run. I go to a lot of conferences. I've seen a lot of panels, seen a lot of slides. This was well done, the videos, the food, working with La Cocina. Like, your values in even the smallest decisions reflect the big picture you're trying to paint. So kudos to everybody on that squad for pulling that off. And there was a statement that was made earlier that basic income, guaranteed income, isn't a silver bullet. And I agree, it's not. We're not fighting vampires either and werewolves. But it is a bullet. And, in an epic battle to kind of win back the country and dignity for folks, we need as many bullets as we can get. Not to be so violent, but somebody else brought up the silver bullet metaphor. So I'm going to stick with that and just say a bullet is better than none in a battle that other sides are winning with great effect. So I want to thank you all for having me and letting me play with you as well as get serious. I want to thank the mayor. I want to thank the program staff and everybody who cleaned and opened doors and whatnot. And I'll hand it back over to Kara. But that's my time. I'm Baratunde Thurston. Thank you. This is Mayor Tubbs. We out.